Oh, hello, darling, and hello to everyone who is watching today during Manchester Pride Conference 2021. How exciting to be here with you digitally. We're coming into your homes, all of course, socially distanced and COVID safe. It's lovely and exciting. So thank you for giving us your time today. In this panel today, being your authentic self, myself and two fantastic panelists are going to explore what authenticity means, what it feels like, and the hurdles of authenticity in 2021. Before we kick things off, it's always lovely to know who's speaking, who's here with you. I'll start with me. My name is Ben Peachy. My pronouns are they, them. I'm a writer, speaker, presenter, diversity and inclusivity consultant, and essentially spend 40 hours a week writing emails. But I'm very, very busy, and one of the main concerns of my work is to always make sure that everyone is included. And today I am joined by two incredible people. It's actually a pinch me moment to have these two panelists with me. So I'm just gonna fangirl over here whilst they introduce themselves. But we have the divine Amy Redmond and the delicious Chloe Cousins. Chloe, would you love to introduce who you are, what you do, and where you are right now?
Yes, I would.
Why
And
not?
I don't think anyone's ever introduced me as being delicious before. So I'm going to take that and keep it. I might write it as a post-it note. Thanks, Ben. That was a really lovely introduction. So my name is Chloe Cousins. My pronouns are she and her. I'm a youth worker. I'm a community organizer. I'm a co-director for Colours Youth Network, which is a youth organisation for QTPOC young people in the UK, and also a strategic lead for Rainbow Noir, which is a QTPOC community organisation, and we've been around for the last eight years, which is awesome actually. And we're based in Manchester, but I'm from Birmingham, so I've got to rep both of these places, right? But I'm in Manchester right now, and it's sunny.
Gorgeous. Yes, today's panel is sponsored by Sunshine. Amy, it would be lovely to hear from you, what you do, where you are right now.
Thank you, Ben, and great to meet you both. I'm really honoured to be here. I'm Amy Redmond, and my pronouns are she, her, and I'm a director of Margate Pride, which is where I am now in my sunny loft. Excuse all the crap behind me. I'm like a part-time drag queen as well, so there's like a lot of crap. And yeah, I am one of the directors of Margate Pride, as I said. I'm a Kent girl, born and bred down here, and then I lived in London for years because I worked in BBC Radio alongside starting a club night called Sink the Pink, which became quite big after just starting it as a silly thing in 2008 with my best friend. That was a kind of accidental career direction, but then I've gone on to start a Pride, and I run now the Women's Arts Festival in Thanet, which celebrates International Women's Day, and it's all about raising up women and girls and non-binary people and everyone, because that's the point of equality, right?
Incredible. So I think it's obvious that authenticity is a really big part of all of our lives, careers, passions, and projects. So I can't wait to get into this conversation. I think the best place to start is the start. Chloe, I'll come to you. What does being your authentic self mean to you, whether that's, through personality or through your work? Just talk us through that.
It's interesting actually, like when I was thinking about my answer to that, because it's tough. I feel like we have to navigate so many spaces where I'm like, oh, what bit of me am I bringing today? What bit's safe for me to bring today? But I think in the spaces where I feel most my authentic self, it means bringing myself without apology, talking about my needs without apology, being a bit energetic without apology. Like even this Zoom space, I've noticed over the last year, like there's a Zoom etiquette, how to be authentic in Zoom. And actually, if you are animated and you are excitable, like I feel like sometimes that's not seen as okay. So even this space has been weird trying to navigate, what that means. But I think for me, it's like being able to bring myself without apology. Yeah, I feel like that's it in a nutshell. Is that too succinct for the question, Ben? Sorry.
No, not at all. And I think you've really hit it on the head there. It's, just showing up as you are without, any filters. And it feels very odd saying that in a world that everything is curated and it's just sort of beyond that, just always bringing who you are. And I'm sure that Amy, you'll have a similar answer. But so again, what does being your authentic self mean to you?
Yeah, you're totally right. It's really similar. I think it's truth, really, being your most truthful version of yourself, and that you have permission for that to evolve as well. because sometimes, you know, we go on our journeys of working out our identity, our gender, our sexuality, and all the many other things that make us wonderful humans, and being okay with that truth. And obviously within that, there's always the respect of others, but having boundaries is a big thing too, of knowing like, I am me and I'm comfortable in this space. And through that, I think you can lead by example for others to find their truth. We've always said that with Sink the Pink, it's like your truth sets others free.
Yeah.
And that's the beautiful thing about inclusivity.
Yeah, and I think that's something really powerful, because when you bring yourself in your full energy, you think you're just lifting yourself up, but that energy goes on to affect other people. And that's, you know, the power of authenticity, really.
It's infectious. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And
That's kind of
And I
infection.
really feel that in lots of the community spaces we're in as well, especially with Rainbow Noir. I think for a lot of people, it's their first time where they've been in a room with so many other queer and trans people of colour, and you're like, oh, like I'm allowed to bring all of myself here. Like other people are bringing that element, and I'm not hiding that bit of me, and I don't feel like I have to here. And I think I've been realising that more and more recently. The power, it's sometimes quite difficult to quantify the power of community, but I feel like inspiring others to be their authentic self is really something magical that happens, especially in our communities, because we don't get that elsewhere. And I'm really seeing like, this is the goal. Like you can't buy that, you can't quantify it on a funding report. Like this is so important. And yeah, just as you said, Ben, you know, you feel like you're lifting yourself, but actually you're lifting the room. You're giving other people permission to be loud and camp and brightly printed or not, if that's not you, you know, and bring your you know, something I've been more acute to recently is just also some of my friends bringing more their access needs to spaces, and that just being a thing. Like, let's start Zoom by saying what I need in this space, you know, and that being really just a part of it and accepted and normal, you know. And I think that's been happening a lot more for me over the last year, and I really think that's important.
Yeah, that's another level of respect, isn't it? Just to say, what do you need within this Zoom space?
Yeah.
We've got one friend who can't handle it when people have got the laptop on their lap and it moves all the time because she feels like she's at sea. And it's like, actually that is true, because if you're in there for an hour and someone's like wobbling, it can be really distracting. So, and she was embarrassed to tell us that, and we were like, no, thank you for telling us. It's like, let's all make sure we're not wobbling now. And once you have this dialogue, it makes you more comfortable to have dialogue about other things. So I think it's learning that you're not going to offend. Actually, you're going to free yourself and others through being honest. Is a really beautifully freeing thing in itself.
I think one thing that is probably really important to mention, because we can talk about it because it's, you know, we've spent time on these journeys, we've been with ourselves for quite a long time, but someone who's new to authenticity, this isn't something we just woke up with and we're like, I'm done cooking, I'm ready, let's go out into the world. It's obviously something we've taken time. Do either of you have any experience with like the process of finding one's authenticity?
Do you want to go?
We're being too polite. We're like, do you want to go, Amy? Should I go?
Zoom etiquette we spoke about. Yeah.
I think for me, what I've realised over the last year is also the spaces I'm putting myself in. And I guess it is quite a privilege to leave a job and enter a new job where things feel really different. But I think for me, I've realised more and more that when I'm around people who respect me and are open to supporting me in all of that, you know, whether that's the way I communicate, whether that's the breaks that I need, whether that's you know, my styles of working, like I feel like I've moved into a really supportive space where all of that's on the table, and it's enabled me to kind of like live in myself a bit more. And even hanging out with a friend recently, I feel like recently I've discovered I might have ADHD, and I'm like, wow, this explains so many things. And I've been hanging out with a friend who's neurodiverse as well, and it's like, I've really noticed the difference of when I'm around that person. Like, we just give each other permission to be in like a way that I recognize I'm not being in other spaces. And I think for me, the idea of being able to walk into my authenticity is also really about the people around me, like realizing more of who I am, but also like if we're not surrounded by people or organizations that are open to getting to know you and valuing and loving all of you, then it's really difficult. So I think a big part of my journey is like, yeah, I want to be more around these people, or I'm going to ask more of this in this space, because actually I can't bring my authenticity if it's close to it. And I think
Yeah.
I've been really, it's quite hard to see sometimes where it's close to it. I think once you break free from it, you're like, oh my God, the world can be like this, you know? So I think, really observing how you are in the spaces, I think can really help you to see what helps you to be authentic.
Yeah.
For me, it's self-care. It's like I've used lockdown to really, I got some Zoom therapy, which is why I'll probably start using this like therapy now, because I'm used to sitting in this chair talking to her. But I found this really cool therapist, and I couldn't recommend it highly enough to everybody, because it's such a journey, whatever age we are, whatever we've been through, to sit and talk through where you're at and stuff you've been through. It's so freeing, and to see that is a way of finding your authentic self, isn't it? It's really like tapping into your inner child and going, what did I go through? Like, I'm a survivor of childhood sexual abuse, so I can say that out loud now because I'm a survivor. So to say it and then to like move forward and know that the work that I do with young people, and I set up a youth group with our Pride, and like it helps me piece together the parts of me. And I just want, I say that out loud just to be able to go like, I'm amazing, you know, not for any like sympathy, but just to go amazing, like we can get through stuff, we can do hard things. And that journey I would so want for others. So to be able to have gone through that during lockdown was particularly special, because obviously we've had the weirdest year of our lives.
Yeah.
And like the therapist used to say to me that I look like a little, because I'd be wrapped in a blanket because it's so cold here in this loft. And she's like, you look like a little like caterpillar, all like in your cocoon. And by the end of it, I felt like a butterfly, because I'd like gone on this journey and kind of rebirthed myself. And I was already a very together and confident person, but there was like a part of myself that I needed to get out and unpick. And I was like, do you know what? This is the time to do it. So I would recommend so much that say, you know, hearing someone else's truth could allow your truth to, I've literally just repeating myself now, but that is my authenticity, is like being as honest as I can be about myself. I hope I can do that for others. And yeah, I helped set up a Pride youth group here in Margate. This is a sad story. One of the first newspaper articles I read when I moved down here was about a young person whose flatmate had attacked him with a hammer because he'd found out that he did drag. He was just a young gay guy that was playing with dressing up, and his flatmate had a problem with that and attacked him with a hammer. Fortunately, he survived, but he has a serious incident. But I read that quite early to moving down here. I moved here about 8 years ago, and it stayed with me so much that I just said, we need a Pride, we need a youth group. And I just went about making it happen and finding a collective of queer people locally. And we now have this regular youth group that meet. And I'm so honoured to have been part of the journey of these young people being able to find each other and find support. That the only place back then really was Grindr, or like our local gay bar, which, you know, isn't always a safe space to be. I'm not slandering that particular gay bar, but if you're, you know, 14, 15, 16-year-old, you know, getting straight in that drunken environment, like to offer a youth group was so like, I needed to do it with all my being. I think particularly now reflecting on what I've been through as a child as well, is just like finding this safe space and being that kind of older sibling for these younger queer kids has been just the most beautiful. Like I get so much from it too, you know. So if people don't know, there is it's called the BU project, which is like a LGBT youth project that happens around the country. And I don't know, I mean, it's always worth Googling. I'm sure you guys in Manchester have got loads of things like that going on. And obviously, Chloe, what you're saying, but certainly in like little seaside towns like ours, there was nothing. Like this is quite a problematic town. So I'm so honoured to have been part of bringing that here. Sorry, that was a ramble.
No, that's the power of what authenticity brings us and the people that we work with. I'm currently writing my first book, which is going to be a resource for non-binary mid-teens. My age bracket is 15 to 20-year-olds, and it's really surprising how much of my own story and journey that I've had to pour into those pages, and it's unlocked so much of the things that I went through. And it's almost that our struggles, we're never grateful for them. It's not something we should ever be like, oh, I'm so thankful for this. But understanding how that discourse can be transformed into power to help others is almost queer people's superpower. It's our empathy, it's our compassion, and that's almost the source where our authenticity comes from. It's what we've been through and how we're desperate to ensure that this just doesn't happen again to other people.
Oh, I can't wait to see that book. What's the plan? When does that come out?
I don't know. It's nearly finished, but I'm sure my editors will have a lovely old time ripping it to pieces. Can't wait for that.
Good luck.
Yeah. So moving on, and I think we definitely have touched on this, and I think people would understand our answers. But when we talk about, you know, how it feels to be our authentic self, sometimes it can feel a bit intangible. But I'm going to give you the hard task of, can you put that into words for me? And what do the positives feel like for you, Amy? You know, looking at your authentic self.
Well, I suppose I feel the most authentic when I'm like surrounded by drag queens and like semi-naked, happy, sweaty people, which is like weird at the moment because we haven't had that. But I still feel it in my core. So I suppose what that looks like is, I mean, this room is literally covered in pictures of me with all my friends and just like queer uplifting imagery. Like this is like a young Sink the Pink picture. I don't know if you can see, there's just like all of us in crazy drag, like in the back of a working men's club in Bethnal Green. And it's like that to just have these visuals all around me is like the reminders of the uplifting. I suppose it's where I get my power to then run the youth groups and like do the other stuff, is that I've got my source of power. It's sort of like the equivalent of needing to like charge your phone. It's like you get your power from your people and then you get to be that power for others. I suppose again that it comes under self-care, because it's like what do you need to do to look after and nurture yourself? I hope that's answered the question. What was it again? How do I
How it feels to be your authentic self and what the positives are.
It feels joyful to be your authentic self, you know, and that's when it's an upward spiral, in the same way that it's sadly a downward spiral if you're not in that flow. And like sadly when people aren't in the flow, they can like want to bring each other down because it's like they're not feeling it themselves. And I think if you can try and get those people and flip where they're at, you know, that's how society can change, when we can raise each other up and listen to each other's voices. Because it's just sometimes it's the miscommunication. And I think with the way social media is, we can all be a bit attacky, particularly at the moment. And it's like, if we could be less catty and more risey uppy, that's the kind of the mission that I'm on, is to cultivate this, especially working with young people, this sort of supportive language and looking out for each other and not going, oh, you can't use that term, it's offensive to that group. And it's like, let's listen and communicate and go a bit slower, and you can't cancel someone for saying one thing. It's like, we've got to listen. We're all learning what you don't get to an age where you know it all. Like, we are all learning every day. I'm going to mess up and I'm going to say sorry and I'm going to learn. And so are you. And it's like, having that dialogue is really part of authenticity, because then you develop, it doesn't need to be something that's like a thick skin, but it's a strength that you know your worth. And I even caught myself just before I said to you, sorry that I'd waffled or something, and I shouldn't say sorry because I'm here and I should own my space. And again, part of that therapy process, this woman said to me, you're running an Empowering Women Festival, Amy. You've got to be an empowered woman, and you don't stop saying sorry. She went, you thank me all the time, stop saying sorry. And I was like, all right, cool. Oh, you know, and I've got to get better at that. So we're all on this journey together, you know.
Yeah.
I'm not saying sorry. I did it again.
No, but
it's such a hard habit to break, isn't it? Like, such a hard habit. I really intentionally try not to apologize for things I am not sorry for, and still end up. It's so hard.
I think there's that real British self-deprecation thing, which I'm kind of proud to be like. You know, it's almost like you don't want to be so American that you're like, I'm just this way. But I actually I read a lot of American feminist literature, because I feel like these women are like, I'm this badass. Like, there's this writer called Glennon Doyle who's done this great book called Untamed about freeing women, and it's like, I want that energy so much for myself, because we can sort of be the more humble, lesser one all the time, and then you end up being trampled on. And it's like, you don't have to be like uber confident. I mean, I do have a side of me that gets in drag and is like a goddess, and I want to be that too. But maybe that's why I do that, because I've got to find the equilibrium of just getting my sass out in the day as well.
Incredible.
Drinks.
Yeah, and I think before I touch on it with you, Chloe, I read something this morning that actually blew my mind, and it's called crab mentality. Because when crabs are in a bucket, if one tries to escape, the rest of the crabs pull it down, because if one person has it, the rest want it and they stop it. So they pull each other down. And humans at the minute, we're existing in crab mentality. We won't just let one person, so we stop everything. And it kind of has to be the opposite of this. We should help each other the most that we can. And you're right, that is how we'll change society. But, you know, us showing up and doing things like this is going to help people stop being crabs and being people that, you know, lift people up. So it's really, really important. So I guess the same question to you, Chloe. How does it feel to be your authentic self with, you know, all that you do? And what are the positives? What do you see around you and the people that you interact with?
Yeah, I'm still getting over the crab injury. I feel like it's sad, isn't it? Like the idea that, yeah, as humans we do that to each other, and even as crabs they do that to each other. I think for me, being my authentic self feels like I'm relaxed, my shoulders are down. It's a kind of I can not feel a sense of anxiety. I think especially as like LGBTQ people, especially as LGBTQ people who are people of color as well, there's so many spaces that we have to navigate where we have to investigate how safe it is to be ourselves. And I think with that, really, you know, I think we carry that anxiety, whether it's in our chest, whether it's in our bodies, whether it's in, you know, the thing that stops us saying what we want to say or speaking how we speak. Do you know what I mean? And it's those, we're doing that so often. And I think when you finally come to a space where you notice, oh, actually, I'm not tense here, I'm just cool, my energy is flowing as it should be. And I think when I notice that happens, that's when I feel like, oh wow, I feel like I'm really stepping into myself here. And it often happens, you know, similar to how you were saying, Amy, you know, in youth groups. I feel like that it's such a buzzy space, it's such an exciting space. And I think, you know, young people challenge you in ways, and in such an important way, actually. And I think it really pushes you to reflect on what parts of yourself you're bringing to that space as well, because we are role models in that space and young people are looking up to us in that space. So I feel like, yeah, it's just those moments where you feel like, oh, I slipped into my mother tongue, or I let out some slang, or I said that word, or we clicked our thing. Do you know what I mean? It's those kind of things of like, oh, in a workspace, or when I'm around, you know, really white spaces or really hetero cis spaces, you shrink. And I feel like where I feel myself growing, and I feel, because I'm quite animated anyway, I'm like, yeah, that's when I'm feeling it. You know, I can feel in my body, I'm moving, I'm not second thinking of what I've got to say. And I think, you know, again, like I feel like I've stepped out of a space where I hadn't realized how much I was making myself smaller, into 2 different organizations actually that are Black led or people of color led from the very beginning, and queer led and trans led from the very beginning. So I feel like, whoa, this space was so different. I'm talking different, my intonation's different, my energy that I'm bringing is different. And I'm thinking, so yeah, I feel like authenticity feels for me like, yeah, when you just can feel yourself, not second guessing, not double thinking, not, you know, without that worry. And, you know, I think we don't have enough space where that happens. And I think even in LGBT spaces, you know, which is why it's so important that Rainbow Noir exists and Colours Youth Festival exists, because so many LGBT young people of colour don't have that space where they can bring their whole selves to often, or those spaces are minimal, or they're online. And even then it's kind of like, how much of online is authentic? So actually being able to be in spaces where, you know, people are real. And I think that's what's the beauty of especially Colours Youth Network, and we really try to bring as many, you know, LGBTQ people of colour into that space as possible. So it's like, look at all these possibilities. They're all so different. Some of us are a bit messy sometimes. We don't always say things perfect. Sometimes I am going to swear, you know, and it's those kind of things that I've really seen that young people are like, you know, like, this is who I can be. I don't have to be this polished version of me that I'm seeing online. As you said, Amy, my language isn't always going to be correct. But, you know, I think, again, what I mentioned earlier about it takes people around you to create that space. Yeah. Because as you said, yeah, we are going to sometimes get things wrong, and it's authentic to get things wrong. And, you know, we have to create spaces where that happens and we can hold each other accountable. And you know, so I think, yeah, it's a space where it feels like the very idealized version of home. I know home isn't always like perfect for people, but I think coming into your authenticity should feel like a home. I'm coming home, I'm at home, got my slippers on, got my dressing gown on, you know, you're comfy.
Yeah.
That's what it should feel like. And I think for so many of us, we don't have spaces where that's how we feel. And I know we'll come on to that about our challenges, but yeah, that's what it should feel like. Do you know what I mean? Get your cardigan on, get your slippers on, you know?
just almost like totally free. No weight on your shoulders. That feeling, like for me, when you've been out all day and you have a shower and like you take your shoes off and you're just like, oh my god, that feels amazing. Just totally centered. And it's really, really special because we don't get that often enough. Even those of us in the industry, those of us doing the work, we don't feel like that all the time. And it is tricky, but it's really important what you both said about mistakes. I speak about this a lot with a lot of different people. I would rather people just show up imperfectly than not showing up at all because they're too scared to make mistakes. Mistakes are totally perfect. In fact, I think they're one of the best things that humans can make because they are huge learning points. Without mistakes, no one gets better. And we have to remember that. And I think we've become almost too guarded in this sort of approach to perfection and this filtered, beautiful image that we show everyone online. And it's just like, where are the real people at? Like, that's what we need to see. And that's who we want to learn from. So yeah, that's a really big message to push home.
And I'd say on that as well, like, you know, when we are in spaces where we want to be authentically able to make those mistakes, we're also open to being challenged, and we're also open to hearing, actually, that hurt, or that was racist, you know, or that was transphobic, you know. And I think sometimes I don't know if we have learned how to do that compassionately, or just how to be able to say, yeah, I'm sorry about that. Like, I've got some learning to do. And I think it's difficult, isn't it? Because I think we want to be able to make mistakes, but I think we also have to realize like what some of the things we hold and how that impacts on other people's space to be authentic or live and be who they are. And yeah, so it's like coming into that space, wanting to bring your full self, which might include mistakes, but also knowing that if you do, like, please own that, please apologize, you know. And I think sometimes, especially within LGBT communities, there's a little bit of a reluctance for that. You know, people are like, I'm oppressed. I you know, some of the idea of like, it's even what you mentioned earlier, Ben, that kind of sense of our past is our superpowers, and we carry that, and it definitely is. I think sometimes people take that into a space to be like, oh, I couldn't possibly be somebody who's squashing someone else. And I think that's such an issue in our communities. And so I just wish people were more open and humble to be like, I messed up, man, and I'm sorry, you know, and I'm gonna be better.
And giving feedback constructively, like going, this is what I thought, and can we talk about it more, instead of it feeling so attacky.
You're not cancelled, but you do need to do better, you know. It's one of them.
And it almost feels like we're playing a game of marginalized chop chumps. Like, this is what's on my card, this is what's on your card. And it's like, no, we're all people, and everyone has the instinct to do better and to learn. And just remember that it's not about the mistake, it's the impact of the mistake. And it's understanding that there is duality. Both people can feel hurt, and both people can be right and wrong at the same time. And it's how we move forwards. And I think, you know, centering it on not what someone represents, but the person in front of you, really bringing it back to the person and the personable experience, I think means that we will begin to treat each other just better with basic human decency. I think that's quite important, right?
That's the minimum we should be hoping for.
I know, but so many people don't do it, so I feel like I am asking for a lot, right?
People are too caught up. I think there's so many systems that working against us, you know, capitalism, ableism, racism, homophobia. There's so many things that we've internalized into our systems of working that we can't even see that we're replicating them, and therefore, you know, creating spaces where common decency doesn't feel like a thing that's allowed, because there's all these mechanisms telling you, no, it's got to be this way. And it's like, who's happy? Who's actually happy there? You know, I think a very small minority are, but there isn't space to talk about that because we've just got to get on with it, you know.
That's why I think lockdown hopefully has given people a bit of time to talk about it, and hopefully we'll come back with this new, I'm like being so optimistic about how we're going to come back, but with a more gentle approach that we can like sit and talk and be a bit more present and be a bit more local, and check on our community a bit more, because it really is about starting local and just checking on your neighbours, and you ringing your quiet friends, and, you know, just being there for each other. Because I think we were so busy before this time that we just got hectic, like that capitalism gets in your system, even when it's not what you're about. You end up like, oh, I've got to get another bit of work and I've got to do this thing. And you sort of, when you have to slow down, hopefully it does bring out your humanity more, and you just check in on each other, like, have you got enough to eat? Like, really back to the survival stuff.
Yeah.
And yeah, groups like what we're doing, it's just integral, because, you know, queer communities in a lockdown, when you haven't got your people around you, you are literally holding photos of your friends, like, you know, so it's like, and we are, you know, successful together adults doing this. Can we imagine what teenagers have gone through in the last year? It's like the PTSD of this time. We've really got to look out for these young people. So we need to build up our strength to enable us to do that. And I've just been for a walk on the beach with my friend Jan, who's in her 70s. And I'm really grateful to have mentors who are older people who I can go to, you know, oh, what do you think about this? And like, just, we were both just talking about cancel culture, and she told me some stuff she'd been through in her early theatre days that, you know, parallels to a lot of the cancel culture now. And I really love having elders, and it really helps me to work with younger people too. So I think it's like getting that support network really helps with your authentic self.
That's incredible. And I think as we talk about, you know, the things we do and the work we do, I don't feel like an elder at 26, but for a lot of people, we are that role model. We're that modern formation of, you know, elder and someone to look up to. So how do you think we're bringing our whole selves to our workplace and, you know, showing up and being the person to look up for? Chloe, I'll start with you. What does that look and feel like for you?
I think some of that, I think, to be honest, as a person of colour and an LGBT person of colour, that's difficult, because I think there's so much racism in the workplace. And, you know, I think as all marginalised communities, as, you know, queer and trans people, as disabled people, as women, bringing your whole self to, did you say to the workplace, Ben, or did I imagine that?
Did, yeah. I did.
To the workplace can be so much out of your hands, because workplaces aren't ready, you know. And even if we look at the news about Pride in London and Ramel Affleck choosing to leave, like, you know, having a black person in his senior position, I think people were like, wow, awesome. But the structures and support around him didn't change to accommodate his authenticity and what he was bringing, and, you know, support for black and people of colour. And so I think that's difficult, because, you know, I'm realising, especially the more I talk to other QC-Pop about this, it's really challenging, because a lot of the ways that we want to bring our whole self to work isn't possible, because we're having to keep our jobs. And, you know, so for me, you know, I've been thinking, well, I did a talk the other day about this idea of community care, and there's a tweet that went viral. Oh, what's the person's name? Can't remember, but she said in the tweet that something like, stop screaming self-care at people when they actually need community care.
Yeah.
And I think, like, that's so relevant to this, and that, like, self-care places the emphasis on the individual. It's your responsibility to bring your authentic self. Community care is all about, well, actually, how do we do the uplifting together, and how do I support you to do that? And I think, especially when workplaces want you to bring their authentic self, but they don't do anything to enable that, how does that happen? You know, it's so for me, you know, my big thing in terms of being able to bring your authentic self to work, luckily I'm in spaces that have been kind of built from the ground and have intentionally thought about, how do we make space for all of ourselves here? And you're working for institutions that haven't got that. I think it's really challenging. And for me, you have to survive in that space. So I think what helps me, or what did help me when I was in different spaces to try and bring more of my authentic self to spaces, was connecting with other people like me. And, you know, like you were mentioning, Amy, about having mentors, your peers are mentors. And I think even just having someone to moan to and say, hey, I'm really struggling with this. How do you get through this? Or how do you show up to meetings? And what are the kind of things that you say that enable you to advocate for your needs? You know, so a bit of that, but more than that, I just want organizations to really do that introspective thinking of what culture is here, and who's it uplifting, and who's it supporting, and who's bringing themselves here, because I think so much of that is so toxic and suffocating. And it's like, you know, I want to be able to I want everyone to be able to come to a meeting, say what they need, bring themselves. And that just doesn't happen. So I mean, if you've got the energy to fight that within your space.
Yeah.
And maybe the spaces that you've got control over, you know, in your meetings, run things how you want to run things. But, you know, outside of that, really looking out for your people who are going to help keep you strong.
Yeah.
Because I think, you know, I'm really seeing people struggling, especially with racism at work, you know, on top of all the other stuff. And you just think, this is really difficult. And actually, it's bigger than all of us to challenge that.
Yeah.
How can you keep yourself strong? And I think the spaces where we can be authentic with each other on Zoom, in the park, boss and joke, you know, I think that's really important. But institutions, you know, I'm looking at you.
Yeah.
You know, really, please do that work.
As white people to help with allyship, because
Yeah.
I mean, I worked in the BBC. It's a nightmare. It's like that program W1A. Like it's like they're trying to do the right thing. Well, they're not actually, but you know, there's loads of problems. But it's like the amount of racism I saw. I mean, I was lucky. I worked at 1Extra, so often I was the only white person in the room. So that I was the most blessed experience of my life, because, well, on so many levels. But the racism that I witnessed, you know, with having the black music station within BBC, it's just like there were so many levels of problem that I won't go into here. But I mean, also within the queer community, know a lot have learned a lot about allyship, and I still could do better, but I hope I do a lot. But I like to call people out, other white people in these situations, because it's not an easy ride. And if you're watching it happen, you're part of the problem, you know.
Yeah.
So it's just using your voice in those situations to say, this isn't cool. Like, are we in the same building? Or if it feels weird, taking that person and just saying, do you realize what just happened? And talking them through it. It doesn't have to be attacky in that way. It could just be because that person might go, God, I've never thought of it like that, you know. So it really has to trying to meet people where they're at. You know, when I first moved back here down to Margate, I had this cabbie say something about the area I live, which, you know, is brilliantly diverse, and he was like, oh, I don't normally drop around that end, because he basically was being racist.
Yeah.
So I just had a chat with him and said, where are you from? Oh, my parents are Irish. I was like, oh, my family are Irish too, so we're immigrants, mate. And I kind of talked to him on that level, and no one had ever called him out on that, because he's probably that guy in the pub who was like, ooh, immigrants. And because I said that to him, I'm not saying I've changed his life, but he definitely went, oh, I never thought of it like that, you know. And I think it's like the level that you can do that as a fellow white person, to try and educate, you know. To be honest, part of you wants to just go, but you that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about making change in society, and actually the people that you want to say that to the most, otherwise we're all in our bubbles of safety. And it's like, we have responsibility as white people to be there for our black and brown sisters and non-binary people. It's like, and brothers, or everybody. It's like we have to, I'm saying sisters because I'm still in International Women's Day mode. We have to be there for each other, and we've had an easier ride. That's what privilege is, right? So unless we use that voice in the room, we're not doing our bit. And like I say, it doesn't have to be hard or difficult. It just has to be all of those little changes.
Yeah.
I even put in my spreadsheet, I don't know if it's a bit clunky, but the way I book the festivals that I book, obviously all the details about what I'm doing, but I also have skin color, education, ability, sexuality, neurodiversity, mental health, body size, housing, wealth, language, gender. Like, I'm trying to think of all of the groups, and then I'm looking at what I'm booking and going, oh, hang on a minute, are they people who look a bit like me, who are around my age? Well, that's not a diverse panel talk, you know. And then I'm looking at how am I doing that, and I'm not doing it in a tokenistic way, but I'm tripled guessing myself, because you have to be on it, like, because otherwise why am I that person?
Yeah.
And I'm running it by all my friends who are in each of those groups. I hope I've said all the ones on my list. That's why I have my spreadsheet, because it's just like, it's not clunky, because it has to be slightly clunky, because it's not your brain might go, oh, that will be a good person for that, and I do trust that I might be choosing the right person, but I might not be, because I'm not in pools of people that, you know, you might not know a certain person. So I'm always having this dialogue, and again, like we said at the beginning, you've got to make mistakes and learn. But I'm really open about the way I program things, because I'm on this journey too. But yeah, allyship is the one, and we know that as queer people, but we certainly have as white people. This is the time to step up and do more than your bit.
Yeah, it's really important, especially like to just get okay with feeling uncomfortable. That's the point, because however uncomfortable you may feel, you will never understand how uncomfortable the other person in that situation feels. And so 5 minutes of discomfort for you might actually change someone's life. Get on with it. And I know it might not sound the most inclusive. Get over yourself just a little bit, because that's our job. That's our job.
Put yourself in their shoes. My friend Naomi set up an account called Everyday Racism on Instagram that's now massive. Like, she's a local girl from around here. Her and her sister set it up. And she said, because I had them as part of POW, she said, we would rather, because it's a difficult thing running an account like that. She said, we'd rather go through this difficult thing than live the life we were living before. Like, you know, we live in quite a white racist area around here. So, you know, Nigel Farage tried to get in Margate. You know, it's like, it's getting a lot better, but they've grown up in that, and they would rather like go through the heartache. And it's a beautiful journey that they've gone on, and everyone should follow Everyday Racism on Instagram because they're doing incredible work. She's a teacher, so she lays stuff out really beautifully. It's great resources to share, but it's a lot of work for for heavy stuff. And it was really struck me when she said we'd rather go through all of that than just live another day, you know, watching something happen on a train that you can't do anything about or whatever, you know. So I think, like you say, it's nothing for a white person to stand in and well, it's everything at the same time. You know what I mean?
I guess just to round it out, I feel like we've touched on everything, but like in a few bullet points, just for, you know, if someone is as an ally who's watching at home, what stops you from being truly authentic? What could we ask people to stop doing to, you know, to allow queer people to lift us up? Chloe, what would you say is a couple of things?
I think just like be more reflective and broad, and so like reflective on yourself and kind of what are you about, and actually does that represent everyone? No. So like, you know, like you said, Amy, having all of the reminder of lots of groups that you know are marginalized, and being mindful of actually how am I including these people and how are they, you know. And I think the ability to be reflective of your space and get other people in to look at that, because I think so many people think they are, but then there's still cultures that are not inclusive. And so I mean, as a starting point, to be reflective of your space and what kind of energy and culture it has, and maybe even ask the people how they feel in that space, you know. And I think a lot of people think, oh wow, we've got really efficient teams and everybody's really happy, and actually everyone's really struggling and not really being themselves and overworked. So for me, it's like to do that reflection to see really what is the dominant culture here, and is it serving people, and what can we do differently, and what money can we get in to make things feel different. Because I think often that's the thing of like, oh, we can't give people self-care days, we haven't got the money, or we can't do this, or we can't spend 15 minutes of the meeting catching up on how people are personally outside of work. And it's like, well, actually that would be really helpful, and that would be what would make people feel more them in the space. Or so I think, you know, getting used to the discomfort of change, and I think that discomfort makes people not want to do that and push back, you know. If you feel like you can't do the change because someone else is on your tail, whether that's a funder or it's someone else, also share that learning with them, because I think otherwise we get trapped in the cycle of no one changing because it's too difficult. But actually the people on the ground, or people everywhere really, but also the people on the ground, you know, they're struggling. Sorry, what was your question again, Ben? I went on an arc.
you answered it perfectly.
I did. Okay.
You did. And the same question to you, Amy. Like, what could people do to help us feel more authentic in workspaces in our queerness?
I really echo what Chloe said there. Yeah, I think it is to listen. You know, actually listening, like properly listening, asking questions and listening, and learning and going away and doing the work, because this is the time to listen. I'll just say that.
Yeah, no, that's incredible. And like, just to close it off, if you are at home, you're watching this and you're an ally, just give whatever you're in abundance of. It doesn't have to be money, it could be time. So if you're in abundance of time, volunteer. If you have really great contact, funnel those people to go and do that work for you. So whatever you have an abundance of, funnel that into making a change. And I think that's all that anyone can ask in terms of authenticity. I would love to say thank you so much, Amy and Chloe, for your time today. It has been such a pleasure to speak with you. I just feel so uplifted, so seen, so valid. So I just honestly, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Likewise, it's an honor to be involved.
And to everyone else who's watching at home, thank you so much for giving us a slice of your day. Just as we close, one of the main aims of Manchester Pride Conference is to make a significant impact on LGBTQIA equality and inclusion to improve experiences across the board for so many wonderful queer people. And as a result, they're encouraging many businesses and organisations watching at home to sign up to Manchester Pride's All Equals Charter. So if that is something that you've listened to this talk and you've gone, oh my goodness, how do I make a change? What do I do? Sign up, and more info on how you can make a difference in your business, in your organisation, as an individual, head to allequalscharter.com / and all the information you could possibly need is there to become just a better human and interact with human decency. That's all we have time for today. As I said, thank you so much for joining us, and I hope you enjoyed the rest of Manchester Pride Conference. Thank you.